Welcome to the Report Card with me, Nat Malkus. Today, I'm having a conversation with Richard Rusick, former high school math Olympian, who's developed an online community, schools, textbooks for elementary and high school students, all geared at engaging students in high-end mathematics. We'll talk with Richard about the world of high-end competitive mathematics and the Math Olympiad, about approaching math instruction through problem-solving versus arithmetic skill development, and how to provide on-ramps to advanced instruction for more students and younger students. I hope you enjoy our conversation. Richard Rusick, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much. Happy to be here.
So, Richard, you are a math educator, and you work with a lot of kids at sort of the upper end of the difficulty spectrum for math, but you didn't start out as an educator. You kind of came up first into this as a math Olympian, right? So for those of us who are not familiar with that world, how did you get into that? And what is the experience like for a math Olympian?
When I was a kid, I really liked math. I was a very competitive kid. I loved sports, but then I was maybe 4.5 feet tall. We're talking sixth grade, so nobody was picking me first for the basketball team. And my mom found out about a math competition called Math Counts, which was a brand new competition then. We're talking back in the 80s. Now it's still the main competition that kids in middle school focus on.
And that's Math Counts?
Math Counts, that's right.
All right.
The National Middle School Math Competition. And I went to that first competition and I was hooked. I was hooked by the other kids. The other kids who were there, they were excited about math. They knew things I didn't know. So there was actually stuff out there that they could do that I couldn't do. And that was challenging to me and exciting. And I stayed with that all through middle school, all through high school. It was the main educational experience for me all through middle and high school. My teachers did a great job making these opportunities available to me. It was also my main social outlet. A lot of my closest friends now, and this is a long time ago we're talking about, are people I met through these various competitions and summer programs that I went to.
Right. And so from there, you went to Princeton, and then coming out of Princeton, you sort of grew into this position at Art of Problem Solving. How did you kind of get back into it? And I guess I'm wondering, where is this community of math Olympians and high-performing math students that are sort of doing this not for glory, but just for the actual joy and competition of it?
They're all over the place. So while I was in college, I co-wrote a couple of books that were strictly for kids that were into math competitions. I came out of college, went to grad school briefly, left grad school because I was convinced I wanted to be a teacher. I taught high school for one semester and I learned something. Teaching high school is really hard. I was not ready for that. So then I took a little time off. I traded bonds for 4 years. And then the internet came along and I realized I could use the internet to build an online school that would draw the students to me that I felt I could serve best. And those were the students that I could empathize with, the students like me who were looking for something more than they were seeing just in their math classes, something that would teach them mastery, put them on a track to a high-performing STEM career, for example. And that's when I came back to Art of Problem Solving and expanded the target from just math competitions to a full curriculum, expanded down in age, and then started bringing in a whole lot of people.
Yeah, so to give the listeners just a sense of what kind of math we're talking about, I just have this example here. I was looking at one of your Art of Problem Solving books and found this problem, find the logarithm base square root of 5 of cube root of 5, which is sort of hard to even picture for most of us. That's on page 11 of a book called The Basics. So how do you get students onto an on-ramp for this kind of math when it moves along so quickly? How do you approach kids to get them into this world?
Yeah, it's really a challenge. One of the most valuable things you can do is expose them to other kids who can already do it. And once they see other kids do it, like part of them will say, oh, maybe that kid's just smarter than me, but there's something in the back of their head that's saying, but maybe I could do that too. And I think that for me definitely worked, and we see that in other kids. The other thing is to present challenges early on before the kids have been taught that math should always be easy. And in a lot of our classes, we keep training the kids over and over on the same problems until they're getting hundreds on everything or mid to high 90s. And the kids start to learn that that's the way math is supposed to be, instead of learning that when you're struggling a bit, that's when you're really learning. And we understand this in athletics. We keep the kids right at a very high challenging frontier whenever we're trying to train them to hit a baseball or hit a tennis ball. Same thing in music. But in math classes, we tend to 95%, okay, now you know it, now it's time to do something else.
Yeah, so let me ask you a little bit more about that, and maybe in the context not just of sort of higher end math, but math that we all encounter. How do we typically in the U.S. approach math instruction, and what would you say are the weaknesses that we do this in our approach? How would you suggest to bring more advanced mathematic understanding and actual sort of problem-solving skills, we might need to alter that general approach?
So there's a few different questions here. One is, well, the one you just hit the nail on the head with the problem-solving approach is not teaching kids. This is very important in elementary school that math is just arithmetic. And this is something that a lot of kids infer from the assignments we give them, the homework they do, that math is just doing these kind of very routine things rather than solving unusual puzzles. You want kids to see problems where the first thing they think is, where do I start? You don't want to hit them with that problem over and over, every single time. They do need to learn the basics. They do need to learn the skills, but you can present them with problems that make them practice those skills while learning these second order skills. We do this a lot in our elementary school curriculum. We have a guy in our office who was the world puzzle champion a few years ago. And as good as he is at solving puzzles, he's even better at making them. So we create these puzzles where the kids, they'll be practicing their multiplication. They'll be practicing their adding fractions. They won't even realize that they're doing that practice because they're so focused on solving this really engaging puzzle. And it's actually the solving of the puzzle, those steps that they have to take, that figuring out where do they start, where do they get their hooks in, that's even more valuable than the multiplication. And that's the thing that we should be teaching more through mathematics, because mathematics is a great way to teach it. We can teach that in other subjects, but math gives us kind of the fastest way to teach those problem-solving skills.
You have a number of irons in the fire between art of problem solving and BEAM, which we'll talk about in a little bit, and Beast Academy, and I'll give you an opportunity to those. But I am curious, how do we find these kids and identify gifted kids in math in the world as it is now?
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough because it's not enough just to say, go get the kids who are getting hundreds. Because there are a lot of kids out there who maybe aren't getting hundreds in their math classes because they've kind of tapped out a little bit.
Yeah.
They've decided that math isn't fun, math's not interesting. So part of it is showing them interesting problems. And sometimes it's not mathematics that's going to draw them out. Sometimes it's going to be robotics. Sometimes it's going to be computer programming. But show them these kind of unconventional problems. And you may find kids who are, they're plodding along with 80s in their math class mostly because they're bored. But you start to show them interesting problems and something turns on where they realize, oh, wait, there's gold here. There's something interesting. And then they start charting a different course. It'll have the knock-on effects usually bringing up their grades in the math class, but that's, really is a secondary value to getting them excited about going deeper, going broader in mathematics. One thing that's, if you can give a student a problem that they can't solve right away and they come back to you the next day and ask you about it, then you've won. You've got the hooks in.
So that's the signal you look for is not necessarily just sort of straight up ability to do difficult problems, but a tenacity to keep at the problem?
Absolutely, because the tenacity is the thing that they need, because no matter how smart they are, eventually they're going to hit a wall. They're going to hit problems they can't do. They're going to need that tenacity to crawl over. It's the same thing with the great athletes, the great musicians, the greats in everything. They're naturally good up to a point, and then they need to work. And that's where you find out, do they love it? Do they really want to do it? Do they have that tenacity? Or are they going to keep going?
Yeah, I mentioned that you have several irons in the fire. I want to just kind of go through some of them and ask you about them. So art of problem solving, what is it and where did it start and where has it developed into in the past several years?
All right, so we started off with those textbooks I talked about that I co-wrote in college. We launched an online school and an online community in 2003 that's broadly international. Like most of the students who are preparing for the International Math Olympiad are active on our site.
Right.
We've got over 300,000 members in the online community. The online school has grown this year. We'll have around 20,000 enrollments. And this is mainly middle and high school math, although a number of our students are in elementary school taking more advanced math classes. We have we have videos and online learning system there. So that's the flagship site. That's what it's evolved into. But then, of course, as you mentioned, we've built a number of other things using the same resources and then expanding those resources into elementary school, into on-the-ground learning centers. Now we're developing educational software for younger kids as well. And we have a nonprofit organization, which you mentioned with BEAM, which is reaching underserved communities right now in New York City and Los Angeles, and we're hoping to spread that much more broadly.
Yeah, so how do you get kids into BEAM? What is it, and how long has it been underway?
So BEAM is our Bridge to Enter Advanced Mathematics. I think we're entering our 8th year now, and the key programs there are we have non-residential after 6th grade, and then residential summer programs after 7th grade. These are students who are very interested in mathematics. We identify them through schools. So we work with teachers, we work with school systems to identify students who are very interested in mathematics. And again, they don't have to be the kids who are getting the best grades. We give them some problems and we tell them, send us your thoughts in a week. And it's those kids who decide to send us their thoughts in a week that we mark as, this is someone who really might be interested in what we're doing. And then we give those students support through high school, help them through the college application process. And in New York City, the high school application process might be even harder. We support them in all the various ways that a lot of our art of problem solving students, the kids we work with online through our company or in elementary school through Beast Academy, a lot of those kids have parents at home who are engineers or mathematicians and come from this background. Whereas Beam, a lot of the students we work with there, their parents aren't connected. They aren't well connected. They're not in schools that have a whole lot of kids who are involved in these sorts of programs. So they don't know what they don't know. They don't know about art of problem solving. They don't know, get online, you're talking to all these kids and they'll tell you what camps to go to or what books to buy. So that's also a big part of Beam, is introducing them to the culture that they're going to encounter when they go off to the top tier colleges they're going to go to, or to the very competitive companies that they'll aspire to be part of or form themselves.
And how many kids are engaged on an annual basis in Beam at this juncture? You say it's in New York and LA?
It's in New York and LA, and each year we bring in a cohort of 6th graders that I guess this year we brought in, it might have been 300 or 400 this year into New York and Los Angeles. And then the 7th grade programs, New York had 2 programs that were around 100 total. Los Angeles next year will have its first residential program. At this point, we're supporting, it's closing in on 1,000 kids because we stay with them all through high school and now through college.
So, Richard, recently, Art of Problem Solving has launched an academy. These are actual physical learning centers. These are sort of schools or centers for students. Where did they launch? And I'm just wondering about how to build this. It doesn't seem to me to be similar to the kind of, remedial learning centers, which we may be more familiar with.
That's right. We've started learning centers that are after school, they're weekends, they're in the summers, and these are for a similar audience to the students we work with online. And being running a .com, running an online school, and having software, I'm supposed to tell you that the internet is revolutionary. It's going to save everybody in education. It's not like that. Yeah, it's not. I mean, certainly it's a wonderful thing for a lot of people, but it's not going to work for everybody. There are a lot of people out there who are very social learners. They need to be around other students. They need to see a teacher who's excited about mathematics. They need to be embedded in a culture that embraces the things that they love. And that's what that's what we are delivering in our learning centers. It also allows us to go younger. Our online school is very interactive. There's a lot of communication, but there's a lot of typing. There's a lot of back and forth among the kids. It's not a great interface for a 3rd grader. But a classroom is a great place to put a bunch of 3rd graders and get them playing with ideas and playing with each other. So this was a big motivation for us to go on the ground, to reach those students that we weren't reaching or possibly couldn't reach just through online.
And how many do you have so far?
We have 4 open right now. We're opening 2 more this fall and expect to open several more next year. And it's also allowing us to branch out. We're going to start building a language arts curriculum that we're pushing out into all of these centers, and then we'll bring back online. And it's allowing us to think more about how to weave together technology in the classroom, because I think most implementations of technology in the classroom might be steps backwards. This is also something I'm not supposed to say as someone who runs an online educational institution, but it's allowing us to be a lot more thoughtful about that, because we are working on both sides of the problem, whereas most technology and education companies are only working on that side of the problem and they don't control the other side of the problem. So it's hard for them to iterate, and that's something we're able to do.
This makes sense to me. It makes sense to me that the Art of Problem Solving academies, these physical learning centers, they have the high touch aspect of supporting kids that need that touch. My question on the Art of Problem Solving online community is sort of, where does that touch come in? Are you able to do that, or is it only sort of supported for kids who are ready to just sort of sit down and interact with worksheets and a computer?
All right. The online school is extremely interactive for the kids who are going to speak up.
Right.
So our classes are live. There's an instructor, there's assistant instructors, there are a bunch of students. We have an online community with 300 or 400,000 kids now, and they've posted millions of times. It's extremely social, as online social activities can be. But of course, not all kids are like that. Not all kids, like in a classroom, I can see when a student is confused, or I can push two students specifically at each other who I know will work together really well. In an online environment, there are kids for whom it is fantastic. Kids for whom a physical environment does not work for whatever social reasons, but you put them online and they open up. And those social interactions can be wonderful, but there are kids for whom online interaction doesn't work very much. And these are the kids who might not be using whatever the social media is as they grow up. And those kids will be much happier in the classroom. So it's allowing us they each serve kids who are social in ways that the kids prefer to be social.
So these are sort of into the advanced mathematics. You also have some efforts to get, they're a little bit more geared towards advanced math, but for every day. One of those my kids love, Beast Academy. What was the impetus for Beast Academy? What is it?
Yeah, Beast Academy is our elementary school math curriculum. And that started from when we finished up our middle school and high school curriculum. We got to a point where we would really like to find more students who love math the way we do and get them involved with art of problem solving. So we had to decide to do one of two things. We could either start marketing aggressively, or we could start creating those students by making an elementary school curriculum. And of course, we're a bunch of math people and educators, and we're kind of a marketing. Let's go for that other thing where we can actually create the kids and build an elementary school curriculum. So we went with the elementary school curriculum first, brought in somebody who had been working at the middle school level with fantastic kids in North Carolina, and just started thinking about what is it that we would have liked to have had in elementary school ourselves. What were the things we loved? And puzzles were a big part of it. But then, what's the delivery mechanism when you're working with elementary school kids? You can't lecture them.
Right.
You can't get them to sit and read a textbook. So we came up with the textbooks of Beast Academy. They're comic books, which people first look at and think is crazy. But in a comic book, you can create conversations with the kids. The kids will emotionally put themselves in the book, so you can have the dialogue that you need to have in order to teach a third grader. And that, I think, was a big step for us. As soon as someone said comic book, we're like, oh, yeah, this is the right thing to do. And then, of course, it's all going to be digital eventually, so comic book is going to transfer much better than a worksheet is. And we have the worksheets. The kids need to do the practice.
Sure.
But we've just recently brought it all online. So we have online versions of the books, practice systems. We're building out videos to put into it. Taken a very long time because the art takes forever to produce, much longer than the math.
Sure.
But we're pretty happy with how it's turning out.
And so Beast Academy runs from what, third grade on?
It's second to fifth grade right now, and then we'll step down to first grade next year.
All right. Well, I don't have a first grader anymore, but I'm sure some of our listeners will look to it. I started out mentioning that you were a math Olympiad winner in 1989. That's some time ago.
Yeah.
How have the U.S. math Olympians fared just sort of historically and in more recent years? You're involved art of problem solving. A lot of these students are engaged in the art of problem solving community online and so forth. Tell us about that.
That's right. So the U.S. team for the International Math Olympiad consists of 6 students, and that's been the way it basically always has been. And the team's always been pretty good. I mean, back in my day, they were consistently top 5, rarely won. And then past 1994, there's a big hole where the United States never wins.
Yeah.
So you get to 1994, I think the U.S. had a perfect score that year, and I think that's the only time that's ever happened. And then you have to get all the way up to 2015 before the United States wins again. One big thing that happened in those intervening years was the rise of China. I mean, China wins quite a bit, but since 2015, we've won 3 of the last 4 International Math Olympiads, and the students on those 3 teams collectively have taken over 100 courses with us. So we know these kids pretty well, and a lot of them used our books from when they were very young. They were kind of the first generation of kids who had access to our full curriculum from the time they were in middle school or elementary school. A lot of those kids started even earlier. I don't want to take all the credit because those students are very much a product of many great programs, and more importantly, a product of their own work, because that's something that really distinguishes a lot of these students is the time that they put into it themselves and sharing with each other.
Right. So for educators and parents, just to sort of close out, from your perspective, what's one way that we can approach math that might bring more kids into an approach that could make them embrace math in a more genuine way and maybe get rid of some of the fear of math or distaste of math that so many students experience?
Yeah, a part of it, again, is this focus on arithmetic in elementary school, but also there's like the American education system by necessity is set up to promote literacy in everything, and that's great. It's a very laudable goal. We want everybody in this country to be fundamentally literate, reading, writing, arithmetic. We need that very much, but it's not set up to reward developing mastery. And there are lots of teachers that very much want to do that, but all the bars we set when we're setting up tests for the schools, when we're setting up tests for funding, when we're evaluating teachers, they're not really well set up to reward those teachers or those students for getting beyond the bar of literacy and reaching the bar of mastery. And it's at that bar of mastery that we need students to be in order to become future STEM professionals. And I think it's at the bar of mastery, no matter what the discipline is where the beauty of any given subject lies. Like the literacy is important, but that's not where the beauty is.
Right.
The beauty of music isn't in the scales. You need the scales, but the beauty of the music is out there at the ends of where the great music is being created. And if we don't show the students that beauty, if we don't let them encounter and actually participate in creating that beauty, it's very hard to get them to believe that there's anything beautiful out there. And so that's something I would want to bring into more of the curriculum, more of a focus on this sort of mastery of beauty. And maybe they don't need to hit every single check mark on the way, but as soon as they start to see these things, they'll go after them themselves.
Richard Russick, thank you very much for coming on the podcast and talking to us about art of problem solving. And if folks want to find out more about it, they can just go to aops.com. Is that right?
That's right.
Fantastic.
Thanks much for having me on the show.
You bet. Thanks for listening to The Report Card. And thanks to our special guest, Richard Russick. You can subscribe to The Report Card on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, or your favorite podcast player. And of course, if you enjoyed this podcast, don't forget to rate and review us on iTunes or Google. It helps us out and helps other people find our podcast. If you have questions, comments, or topic suggestions for future episodes, reach out to us at ed.podcast@aei.org. Until next time, I'm Nat Malkus.